All right. Hi, and welcome everybody to Cultivating Learning Community Building Through Art. I am so excited to be here with you today and my special guest, Eve Eaton. Today in this session, we're going to be exploring how to use digital museum resources to nurture students' abilities to explore art and explore ideas of community and actively participate in community building in your own classes. This session is going to be interactive throughout today. We're going to be discussing strategies and modeling transferable techniques that you can participate in using the chat, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And you'll leave with ready to use activities that you can adapt and implement with your students right away. So again, thank you all for joining us. We're excited to have you here. My name is Tess Porter, and I'm a digital content producer at the Smithsonian Office of Educational Technology, which until very recently was known as the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access. And again, I'm joined today by our special guest, Eve Eaton, who is a third grade teacher at Sidwell Friends School. Eve and I have been able to work together a lot over the last few years. It's crazy how long we've known each other, and I'm just thrilled that she's here today sharing some ways that she's used the techniques that she's going to be sharing with all of us today with her own students in the classroom to explore these ideas. So she's brought with her some documentation of her own students' work, and we'll walk through that with us as we move forward in today's session. So Eve, thank you again for joining us.
Well, thank you. I love being here.
So this is one of many sessions that we run during the school year out of the Smithsonian Learning Lab. What you see on the screen right now is our October session schedule. It's coming up for this month. There's a lot going on in October. Everything from online office hours, getting started and creating collections sessions that focus on how to get started and create collections with digital museum resources, as well as two special sessions. One, which will focus on enhancing storytelling with digital museum objects with the National Postal Museum, and the one on taking action on climate change with the Cooper Hewitt and Doris Sung, who is one of the 2021 National Design Award winners. If you'd like to see links to all of these sessions, see the full schedule, see our archived sessions, ones we've run in the past that are available for you to view on demand, you can find them all by visiting the Learning Lab Help Center. I'll put the URL here at the bottom of the screen. It's learninglab.si.edu/help. I just mentioned archive sessions. I'd like to state right here at the beginning that this session will be archived after it airs live. So if you want to watch a part again, share it with a colleague, you can do all of that by visiting the URL that you are watching the video at now. So again, this session will be archived right after it airs live. You'll also find that link to the archive on the Help Center. So I mentioned the Learning Lab just a moment ago. This is something we're going to be talking a lot about today. If you aren't familiar with it already, the Smithsonian Learning Lab is a free online platform designed for teachers and students, but available for anyone to use, where you can discover digital museum resources, create interactive learning experiences, and share your discoveries and creations with others. The platform does not require an account to use. Everything that we're sharing today, the resources and collections, are ones that you can access without an account. However, if you do create an account, that's when you can start pulling together collections, which are these interactive learning experiences built from digital museum resources on your own. So Eve and I are going to be sharing a lot from the Learning Lab today. We've gathered together a lot of resources on the platform that may be helpful to you as you explore how to support community building and explorations of community in your classrooms. We've also built a special Learning Lab collection that makes available all of the things that we're going to be screen sharing today. A link to that collection is included in the video description. So if you scroll down right now, you'll find a link at the very end I'll also screen share it later and talk a little bit about what we gathered there. There's a lot of stuff that Eve and I are really excited about. We built it today. We kind of both went down rabbit holes. It was a lot of fun. So we're excited to share it with you. If you're interested in learning more about how to use the Learning Lab, for example, how to search for resources, build collections of your own, and more, that Help Center that I mentioned earlier is also a great resource for that. So on the Help Center, you'll find step-by-step instructions on how to do really everything on the Learning Lab, from finding and discovering resources, creating collections, and sharing what you find with others. Of course, too, you'll find our schedule of upcoming events as well as our archived ones. So again, you can find the URL for the Help Center here on the screen, learninglab.si.edu/help. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that this is an interactive session. Even I really want to make sure that what we share today is as helpful to you as it can be. We're also planning on modeling some of the techniques that Eve has used with their own students, which is a really wonderful opportunity. I'm excited to take part in it, to step into the role of a learner and experience what going through some of these strategies are like from a learner's point of view, so we can better understand how to implement them as educators. Throughout this session, we want to hear from you. So whether it's responding to some of these techniques as we model them as learners, or if you have ideas on how you might use these ideas with your own, or these techniques with your own students, or if you have questions, whether it's about facilitating these techniques, questions about Eve's own experiences using these in her classroom, or about anything else. So depending on the platform you're joining us on today, there are a couple different methods you can use to interact. If you're joining us on YouTube, you can send ideas, questions, and comments at any time using the chat box, which you'll see to the right of the video on YouTube. And if you're joining us on Facebook, you can do the same thing by using the comment box, which you'll see below the video on Facebook. So to get us started off with, we wanted to start with two opening introductory questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these. So please feel free to share your ideas in the chat. The first question is, what is a community? And the second is, what does it mean to belong to a community? Eve, I'm going to turn it over to you as we wait for initial responses to come in.
All right. Thanks, Tess. So as Tess said, my name is Eve Eaton, and I'm a third grade teacher at Sidwell Friends School here in Washington, D.C. And I've been engaging in this work since probably about 2013, 2014. I was lucky enough to be an education fellow at the National Museum of Asian Art a few years ago, where I really was delving into some museum resources. So I love being able to pull these museum resources in, and even pre-pandemic was trying to use as many digital museum resources as possible, because sometimes it's hard to take a field trip, and sometimes you want to preview a field trip kind of experience where you can use these museum resources in your classroom. And that's one of the reasons why I really love using the Learning Lab, because you can make these collections of things. So I'm super excited to share some of what I have been doing in my classroom over the last couple years. And I'm excited too to hear what you have to say about what is a community and what does it mean to belong to a community.
I see a great first comment that came in here. I'm going to pull it up on the screen for us to read. This user says, community can be defined by one element, such as geographical location, or multiple elements, such as a common goal. For example, want to live vegan. That's a great way of dialing that down. So shared elements that people agree in, or kind of a shared location, and it can be more than one thing that they share. I think that's something I was thinking about too in my own response to this question about what is a community. I really think about it as sharing things with others, finding kind of a common ground with others. And for me, sometimes that's geographical location, thinking about my neighborhood, but also things that I share in common with other people. Like I'm a big knitter, so I have a community of knitters that I am a group a part of. Um, Philippa has a comment here. Belonging to a community gives a sort of anchor to past and future. Thank you for sharing that, Philippa.
That's fantastic. And I feel like being in a community also gives you that sense of safety and belonging, and it can help you feel seen. And that's such a huge part of what we want as a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
I see another user has said that belonging to a community can hopefully provide a sense of safety, security, and camaraderie. Absolutely. These are fantastic. So while we're waiting for a few more comments, hopefully to come in about what is a community and what does it mean to belong to a community to you, just to share the plan for the afternoon, we're going to do a little experience together as adult learners or online learners here. And work through the experience that you might go through with in your own context with your own learners. And Tess and I feel really strongly that it's important to be able to have that experience yourself, so you know what kind of struggles your learners might be going through as you introduce this kind of work to them and this kind of thinking to them. That it's good to be able to know what they might be thinking and what they might be feeling as they're engaging with this work. So we're going to do that together for a little bit and hopefully have you all participate a little bit more in the comments. And then after that, I'm going to share a little bit of my picture practice and how I used some art to help build some community with my students just at the beginning of this year. Because as a teacher, building community, is obviously a year-long process, but we really think about it so deeply at the beginning of the year as we were building these new communities of students that come into our classrooms. Oh, and I see someone else has said the communities that we belong to help shape our identity. I totally agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So with that, I think that we can probably dive into our work together. So we're going to put up on the screen an image here. And we're not going to tell you very much about this image right away. But what we would like for you to do is to first just sit with the image for a little bit, start to observe it. And one way to start observing details is you can start at the top of the photograph and let your eyes kind of wander down to the bottom and then move from one side to the other. Really trying to take in the details that you see here. And so in the chat, what we would love for you to do is just start making some observations. What is it that you see in this picture? And any observations, and these could be things that you could, if we were together, just point out and point to, such as, I see a window or I see people, just things that you could actually point out to another person that might be standing with you. Those are the kind of observations that we want to get at first so we can really dive into this picture and start thinking about it a little bit more. So Tess, I don't know if you want to do some zooming in so
Sure.
viewers can see it a little bit closer.
I realized I don't have the ability to zoom in that I thought I did. But let me here. I'm going to do a little bit of screen magic for a moment, and we're going to switch over to another version of this, which is the one that you'll have access to later on when you look at the collection that we've shared in the chat. All right. This is the same photograph as it exists on the Learning Lab, and here we have some tools to help zoom in. So I'm going to zoom in to help us look at the art, the photograph as Eve was describing. So starting at the top and moving down side to side.
And I'm noticing that some people have noticed the comfort level of how everyone is sitting or standing, and groups of people are sitting outside their apartments. So now, as Tess is zooming in, do you notice anything else? I'm noticing that some people are noticing that they're looking mostly in one direction, as if we're waiting for something, a parade maybe. There are all ages, many generations present. The clothing would suggest that it might be summertime. We have some wonderings about, are they waiting for something? People look hot. They seem to be squinting in the sun. Seems to be warm weather because of the sleeveless tops.
Such great observations.
Yeah.
Something that I noticed is a few people are sitting on chairs. So maybe they had some time to plan ahead for this. It raises a lot of questions for me.
And I was noticing that there seem to be people gathered in one doorway, and there are not people gathered in the other doorway.
Let's take a closer look at that.
All right. I also have noticed that this is a black and white photograph. um, so the next question that I have for you is, what are you starting to think about this work? And we did have some of those. I noticed that we were starting to get into that line of thinking when we had some wonderings about, are they waiting for something? So what are you starting to think about? What does this work make you start to think about?
I think we've also had some really great thoughts here in the chat too, along the lines of thinking it might be summer because of this evidence that we're seeing. So looking at people squinting and noticing what they're wearing with the sleeveless tops. I saw a lot of people finding visual evidence here that they're using to make some conclusions.
Mhm. Is it in thinking about what the people are doing? Is that making you start to think about something? And also, you could think about, are there things that are missing here? Or are there things that you are wondering about with your observations of this photograph? Are there things that you're starting to wonder um, might be going on here? I see the clothing design could suggest 70s or 80s. Do they all live in this building? Are people visiting? What brings or binds these people together? What do they think about where they live, opportunities, or chances missed? These are great things to think about. I love
They
these
are.
questions.
Me too. It's making me think about too, putting myself into the photograph. What are times that I've sat outside of the building and why? Can that help me figure out what might be happening here?
Mhm. I'm also wondering, why there are some people that are sitting on chairs and others seem to be sitting on the sidewalk and others are standing, um, and what that might suggest to what's going on. I'm also wondering about in the doorway, why there seems to be something across the doorway.
I was just about to raise that same question too.
And I noticed that someone in the chat has noticed that their body language suggests that they know each other, or at least are comfortable in this place together. And there's a wondering if are they neighbors? So we're getting a lot of thinking here about the community that these people might be in or might be a part of, and are they a part of the same community here? With the suggestions of the apartment building, and are they neighbors, and what is pulling this group of people together?
Some great additional observations in the chat. Someone's saying there's a sense of anticipation in the midst of seeming to be relaxed. What's about to happen? Someone else says, I wonder why they don't look happier. No one seems to be very anticipatory, more tired, bored. So different perspectives on the expressions here. Someone else is pointing out too the diversity of ages, races, clothing, etc. means I'm not seeing stereotypes, which I like.
Awesome. Well, I'm loving all of these observations here. So thinking about our next question is, what connections can you yourself make between you and this work here? Now, based on your observations and hearing what some other people were observing in the chat, questions that you may have had, wonderings, what you were thinking about this particular picture, what connections can you now make between yourself personally and this photograph?
I think one of my ponderings personally earlier kind of fits into this question. When I was looking at this, I was thinking about times where I have gathered outside an apartment building. And I was thinking about, either I'm sitting out there with friends or people I live with or my neighbors. Sometimes it's just to enjoy being outside. Sometimes it's for a block party or something else. So that started making me think too about, those are all communities that I'm a part of in different ways. And those are all different ways that I gather with them. So I was thinking about myself and how I exist within some communities personally.
So I think that the clothing and the suggestion that this is probably summer really makes me think of times when I have gathered outside my apartment building to celebrate something with the 4th of July. And that holiday very specifically came to mind when I started thinking about this and the gathering. And I don't know why 4th of July happened to pop in my head, but it made me think about the times that I have gathered with neighbors and friends together to either to do something or to celebrate something or to enjoy the day. And I think the anticipatory glances on some of the people in this photo are making me think that they are waiting for something. They're waiting for a parade to begin, or maybe they're waiting for a fireworks show to begin, and they're gathered early because they want to get good seats for those fireworks. But that was the kind of connection that I was making with this particular photo. That was what it was making me think of.
Yeah, I hear you talking about too your own personal connections to communities, times that you've gathered together to celebrate with other people. I'd like to invite folks who are watching again as you continue thinking about this. What connections can you make between you and this work here? There's really no wrong answer to this. I think for us, at least sitting here as an adult, it requires some degree of vulnerability to say like, hey, this is my personal connection to this, which is an interesting exercise, right? But we would love to hear what you think. What connections can you make between you, yourself, and this work here? I see some nice comments here. Agreed. It makes me think of waiting for the 4th of July parade as a kid or as an adult.
Absolutely. It reminds me of times when the power would go out and we all went outside because it was too dark and hot to stay inside. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why some people aren't looking so happy. Perhaps that was going on in this picture. So our final part of this routine is to think about how might this work that we are looking at here, this photograph, be connected to bigger stories of community, and about the place that communities hold in the world, and the place and how we are interacting with all of the different communities that we belong to. And so um, I was thinking about, as far as I was thinking about how many different of all the different places that I have lived, this photograph is making me think of the my connections, and I feel like it's like that trail of breadcrumbs that I have left throughout my life of the different places where I have lived and the different communities that I have been a part of, and how meaningful um, those geographic communities were at the time because of the close living spaces that often brings people together, because you are seeing them every day, and you're getting to know them. And so I was thinking about that, how great it is if you do happen to move around, that you can be parts of these different communities, and how that can shape your world and the worlds of people that you are living with.
Mhm. Yeah, riffing off of that, I think it was making me think about too, for me, the joy that I found in those community gatherings, and clearly the other people who were gathering found some joy there too. It's something that's really enjoyable for us to gather together with people, that we live geographically close to or have shared interests with. I see a nice comment here in the chat. It makes me think about how much I miss proximity to people because of COVID. Absolutely.
Right. And we really have been lately feeling that absence of community because we have been so isolated. And how
Mhm.
wonderful it would be to be in this kind of space again where you can just hang out with people.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wish I had time to do this along with friends I feel comfortable with, even if we aren't talking.
Mhm.
Absolutely. What a great
Mhm.
comment. Well, thank you for participating in that. We're going to kind of switch over. The routine that we just engaged in is called See, Think, Me, We. And this is a routine that is part of the Arts as Civic Commons, or Artsy, which is a new research branch of the Project Zero. And so this is a routine that I actually have used with my own students to really start to think about this idea of community. So with any artwork, if you choose to use this routine, you ask those prompting questions and see how the conversation flows. And you can do a written conversation as we did, or, if you are in the room with people, have an actual conversation, which is so much fun to have. So in our last few minutes here, I would love to share a little bit of my picture of practice of how this worked with some students. So my third grade students are 8 and 9 years old, and we used this routine with them. And so if we go on to the next slide and the next one. When I use this with my students, just like we did at the beginning of our session here, and we asked you a question in the chat about what is community to you, we did the same thing with our students in the classroom, and we had a chalk talk. And for those of you who don't know what a chalk talk is, it's where you put a question on a piece of paper and everyone is silent and they write their responses. And the beauty of a chalk talk is that those learners who really need a little bit more time to think and to process have the time to do so. And there can be a lot of agreements and connections visually, which is really beautiful when you start to see students write a little arrow and say agree, or draw an arrow from one comment to another and say yes and build off of each other's thoughts. So we asked a variety of questions over the first few days of school, and these were three of them. What are the qualities of a good classmate? What does community mean to you? And what does community look like in a classroom? So we're really trying to get them to think in different ways of what community meant to them. So then after that, we went and we looked at this photograph. So we didn't look at the photograph that we looked at together as adult learners. And I chose this photograph very specifically because it is of children. And while they are outside, and it could be in a neighborhood setting, it could also be in a school setting. And so that was part of the reason why I chose this photograph. For the children in my class to examine. And we did the see, think, me, we protocol or thinking routine to look at this and to still continue to think about community and what it meant for these children in this photograph to be in community with each other and what this photograph was saying to them. And so on the next slide, you can see that, so we did a combination of written responses. So students were able to write down what they were thinking first, and then they were able to share out. So we encouraged them to have lots and lots of written responses and then once they were noticing a lot of things, like you say the hopscotch in the tree, and they started counting people and things like that, that led to a lot of questions and wonderings. So they were wondering, why did somebody even take this photo? And what was the boy drawing? And is that boy that's by himself just drawing, is he happy? How is he feeling not necessarily being a part of the group? So we started having these conversations about it. It led to these conversations about, is it okay to play by yourself? Which for an 8 and 9-year-old is a super important question. To be able to have the space to say, yes, that's okay. And sometimes to say, well, sometimes I play by myself because I don't have anyone else to play with. And so it opens up this safe space because you have the photograph there to start looking at and talking about for these conversations of what does it mean to be able to be interacting with each other. And especially now, since we are at my school, we are back in person full time. And some of these children have not been back in person with a larger group of children for, over a year, as I'm sure that is true in many schools. And so giving them kind of the social language that they need to be able to say, these are things that I'm not sure how to do yet, which is unusual for an 8 or 9-year-old because they used to have a lot of practice with being with each other and asking each other how to play and inviting others into play. But that was a big conversation that we had around this. And so after we looked at these, we had those questions and wonderings, we had made some connections on the next slide between themselves, and they started to think about their own identity. So some people were thinking about who these children in the picture were. And one little boy made a lot of personal connections. He looks to be about the same age as me. He looks to have the same skin tone to me. He looks to be a boy and I'm a boy. So it's making those kinds of connections. And then other children were making connections like, well, sometimes I like to play by myself and sometimes I like to play with others. So those social connections and being able to have the space to have both of these conversations around the same photograph. And then that led to a bigger conversation about the system of community. So you can go on to the next one. Thank you. So these are just some screenshots of the Artsy handbook, which is part of the Learning Lab Connection, their collection that Tess is going to share at the end of our session here. And in it, it talks about how to use art as this to examine systems. And we loosely followed some of these plans of going from art and talking about, what is this community? How is the system of community? How does it work? How are we all a part of it? And the other thing that's really beautiful about this Artsy handbook is that there are some viewing moves and dialogue moves, which can help you deepen the questions that you, as a facilitator of this conversation, can use to get different kinds of responses. So I picked up on some of the viewing moves when I was asking questions in this session when we were looking at the photograph of the apartment building. By talking about letting your eyes wander around the page, looking from left to right, noticing what isn't there. Those are some of the moves that are suggested here. And the same thing with the dialogue moves. So as you are having a conversation, how can you help pull those connections together? So these are really wonderful resources to use as you are starting to get into use thinking routines. These are wonderful resources to fall back on and to look at and to really put into your practice. And so on the next slide, during our conversation, we moved from just what is a community to what is a learning community, since we're at school, and we really wanted to focus in on this, what is a learning community, because that's what we are a part of. And then on the next slide is a picture of our conversation. So we had lots of large and small group discussions, and you can see that there's some evidence of that there. And then they started creating their own pictures of what do we want our third grade learning community to look like? And what are some pictures of what we mean when we say we're communicating with each other? What does that actually look like? So they started drawing pictures of that together. And then finally, those pictures ended up in this very beautiful map that they have created. So these are our community agreements that we have created from going through this process of really deeply thinking about who we are as people and who we are together as a group. And the things that they want to remember. So around the map, around their pictures that they drew are their phrases and words that they want everybody to remember: to be inclusive, to feel safe, to be supportive of each other, to help each other, to communicate both when somebody might be hurt or when somebody might need some help. Learning. And so and we've talked about how this can morph and grow as the year goes on and as we get to know each other better. And we can add some things to this. We can take some things away if we feel like we don't need reminders because we just do that thing all the time. So that is just a very short picture of my practice of how we used art in one way in my classroom. So that's all I have to share right now. So if anyone has questions, I would absolutely love to have those. If you have some questions, you can put them in the chat.
Yeah, please share your questions in the chat. I just want to say thank you so much, Eve. I think what I really appreciate in this is it's such a good way to open up conversations, to create opportunities for people to bring in their own personal perspectives and connections. And then I love too, I mean, the end result of this is you're creating a statement of values for this new community that you're going to be creating together. And that I love the freedom too of, being able to come back to this over the year as your community grows and continues working together, that this isn't, static, that this can change. I think this is really, really wonderful. I just want to echo the nice comments here in the chat too about inspiring them to think in words and images. And that it's just really great work.
Well, thank you.
While we wait for questions to come in this, essentially we're at kind of the open Q&A part of today's session, I wanted to share that Learning Lab collection of resources that I mentioned at the beginning. Again, this is something that's linked in the description of the video. I'm switching over to it now. We viewed it a little bit earlier. I'm also going to paste it here in the chat for you, so you can see it right away if you're having trouble finding it in the description of the video. You can find this on the Learning Lab right now by searching for Community Building Through Art. What we've pulled together here are all of the resources that we talked about today, alongside some ones that complement them very well. Well, there is extensions into the photography projects that both of these photographs were pulled from. alongside the Arts and Civic Commons Handbook and more. So let me just walk you through this because there's a lot of really good stuff here. So at the beginning, we have the 2 photographs that we just looked at alongside those project zero thinking routines that both we used and Eve's students use. See, Think, Me, We, and Chalk Talk. In a Learning Lab collection, if you haven't visited one before, all of these are resources and you can click on any to view it in detail. So sometimes that'll be an image that you can zoom in on like we were seeing earlier. Sometimes it's a link out to another website. Sometimes it's also an embedded video. So in the next 2 sections, we focus on the photographs. The first one is from the East Baltimore Photography Survey, which is part of an exhibition that's on display at the Smithsonian American Art Museum right now. So there's first a video here that Eve found this morning. I watched. It made me a little emotional, but it was really interesting. It talks about the photographer of this piece and the 2 other photographers that were part of the project, all women taking photographs in East Baltimore in the 1970s. So this video is with the curator, and he talks a little bit about their project and why their photographs are so impactful. There's a great collection, another Learning Lab collection here built by another educator at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Elizabeth Dale Dinas, who has pulled together photographs from that exhibition in the Learning Lab. So say if you wanted to run an activity like this with your students, but wanted to check out some other similar photographs, this is a great place to look. And then there's the digital exhibition for that exhibition that's on display right now at the Smithsonian American Art Museum as well, that provides some additional information. There's also the second photograph, which was part of an exhibition a few years ago called Down These Mean Streets, Community and Place in Urban Photography. And likewise, we pulled together a video, a Learning Lab collection of photographs, and the digital exhibition for you. Then in additional resources, I first pulled in one of Eve's collections that she's built around this idea of community and is used with her own students before. She's gathered together some really rich artworks about community and some thinking routines to use alongside them. You can also find her Learning Lab profile page, so you can see all the collections that she's created and published. And then we've also pulled in the Arts and Civic Commons website and that handbook that Eve was talking so much about. So you can go use this right away to find those frameworks that she was sharing at the very end. And then here's a lesson plan from Incitement that served as inspiration for some of what we did in the beginning. Eve, I know I gave a really quick introduction to this collection. Is there anything else you want to add on to that?
No, I would just urge people to play around. The Learning Lab, as Tess and I like to say, the Learning Lab is like going down a rabbit hole because you go for one thing and you can find so many amazing things there. And it is really worthwhile to spend some time if you are thinking about using some museum resources in your classroom or in your context. I highly suggest going to the Learning Lab. If you create the free account, it is really easy to gather collections together. So the community collection that Tess has linked up here, that I have been working on that for about 4 years now. And it's something that as I find pieces that might go to that might speak to some of my students' context or identities, I will put that in there. So it has been built over a lot of time because I feel like students need to be able to see themselves in the art, and they need to be able to see themselves in what is represented around them. And so the Learning Lab collections and having access to those Smithsonian resources is just such a fantastic thing. And the greatest thing is that you can use them on the Learning Lab, as Tess was showing you back when we were looking at the photograph, and you can zoom in and zoom out, which is really fun to be able to do when you're looking together in class. Or you can just have it as a static image that you either use or project, because you can download it to just have that image if you don't want the students to have any of the extra information at first, and you just want them to be able to look at the image that you have there before they know what the title is, or who the artist is, or where it was where that takes place. Sometimes it's nice to be able to give them just that before and have them really engage with it in that way before you give them some of the background information. But it's a fantastic resource and I highly suggest using it.
That technique is pretty similar to what we did today too. I mean, thinking about how we looked at the artwork together, we didn't look at really what it was or talk about where it was taken, when it was taken before. Yeah. Well, I see there are no questions in the chat. One final call before we close out today's session, but I just wanted to thank you all again for joining us, and thank you again, Eve, for sharing how you use digital museum resources in your classroom to support explorations of community and community building. This is really helpful and so interesting.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed being able to share today.
So again, for everybody watching, if you want to watch this again, if you want to share it with someone else, it will be archived at the same link that you're watching it at now. As soon as I end the session, you'll be able to rewind and view it again. And it'll also be added to our archive of sessions on the Help Center. But thank you all again for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.